You have the ring. And I see your Schwartz is as big as mine. Now let's see how well you handle it.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and the Ten of Swords is over. We're heading into Reign of X. This is apparently the follow-up to Dawn of X. It appears that Jonathan Hickman is going to be breaking up his timelines on his time on X-Men into little like titles, little chapters that I assume are all going to be leading up to events. So it's time to wrap up Ten of Swords so we can get into Reign of X. And here with me to talk about the Ten of Swords event, just our overall feelings, point out some things that we thought were really cool, some things that we didn't think worked out very well, is my good friend, El Percherino, the Poobov Comics himself. Perch, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, it's weird. It's finally over. We're finally at the end.
Yeah, counting the True Preludes ended up being a 24 issue event, rather large. I'm personally giving it a C-. When we did the midterm, I was at a B-. I thought there was more highs and lows. But really, once we got into combat, there is far too jokey for my taste. We'll get into that. And also kind of undid a few of the highs that I really enjoyed. So it definitely knocked down the grade. Not the greatest event. I'm not the biggest fan. Obviously, there are big fans. I hear from them every time I do an X-Men video that really thought this was the heat, but it wasn't my event.
Yeah, it wasn't mine either. Although I get better why for the people who do like the event, I get why they like the event a little bit more. I think I understand where they're coming from. And everybody's going to have a different view on things. This one was not for me, but I think that there's some tangible things which we're going to get into that worked and some that didn't work. But all in all, the part that I keep coming back to that get stuck with is you're at about 22 issues for the event, 24 with 2 prelude issues or more than that, because you really did have to read more parts of Excalibur to understand parts of what were going on leading up to it. That's a lot of comics. And so to have this many comics and then wind up with this kind of result is it sticks. It's hard for me to take.
I'm with you, brother. So let's kind of get into like the 3 big takeaways. We'll talk about the 3 specific moments that I thought were good and 3 specific moments I thought weren't very good. Now, before we get into the details, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoy these videos. Give us a thumbs down if you don't. We enjoy doing these wrap-ups. There will be more coming in the future. And definitely telling us your thoughts on Ten of Swords as we finally wrap this up, move into Reign of X. Were you a big fan? Were you not a big fan? Did you think it started out great? Maybe dwindled as it went along? Did you think they stuck the landing? Definitely let us know what your thoughts are, because we want to have a discussion about this with you as well. Now, getting into it, normally we would just kind of talk about the art first, but I think the art trickles into one of my big takeaways is there were far too many cooks in the kitchen. I believe there ended up being over a dozen creators between the writers and the art teams.
Yeah.
And there probably wasn't enough oversight as far as editorial services from Jordan White and probably Jonathan Hickman himself as the head of X. So we have wildly varied art styles. We had wildly varied writing styles that were all supposed to cohesively come together as one big event, like one narrative. And I don't think it landed correctly.
No, I don't either. And defenders of this have said, well, but these are all individual titles. You weren't getting a traditional event book. You're getting a crossover. And I get that. However, you still, when you start putting chapters on the front, then you are saying you're dealing with a connected story. And this event, it more than anything, I think it's the creative team is involved in that. The pacing was really weird. Like it would be super slow and then fast, and then it would drag back out again. They devote like 2 issues to a fairly small thing, and then you have a pretty major kind of payoff moment. This whole scene in the middle there of Storm taking the sword was one of the strangest drug out moments of her getting this sword. And then the moment where she uses it, kind of her big moment where she defeats death, was 3 pages. 4 pages. Yeah. It's like, that's not a great payoff. It's the wrong direction for her. And she had a couple killer moments in here. It was just odd. Well, by contrast, however, that Wolverine issue there on the left is that was very strong. It was good art. It was paced very nicely. It had some flashbacks, some modern time, and it all kind of came together very nice. It was just all over the place. And I think you see then with the different art styles, different writers, then it really starts to stick out. This group's talked about how they coordinated, regularly. They were doing Zoom calls, and it was very much a tight office, but it did not, the end product did not come across that way.
Well, and I don't think Jordan White provided good oversight on this event. I understand if everyone's getting together on a Zoom call, they're all creative people, probably all have their different, senses of humor or writing styles. I know Ben Percy's writing styles always leaves something out there for the character to find. And by the time he reaches that, there needs to be something else out there for the character to go find. You see that specifically in Wolverine and X-Force going forward. Teenie Howard has a different writing style and all that stuff. So it felt like there was a lot of people coming up with a lot of ideas, and they needed somebody to say, listen, we've got 40 ideas here. These are the 5 that are good, and we're not going to use these 35. But it felt like they let them incorporate too much stuff in here. And that was definitely exacerbating as an event.
Yeah, for sure. There were too many people in this, and there were too many spinning plates that they got going. There were just they got to do way too much.
Yeah. So another thing, it kind of flows into this, is there was far too much filler in this comic book. Like there's the 2 issues of Hellions felt like a completely different story, and they didn't fit into the Ten of Swords overall chapters. Like, that could have been its own side story that was just happening in Hellions. That wasn't even a chapter and event. We know they retold the origins of Arakko and Amenth and the splitting of Okara upwards of 5 times now during Dawn of X. Specifically, X-Men 13 and 14 told the exact same story twice. Very, very off-putting to me. There were a couple of what felt like they were meant to be big moments. We'll kind of get into some of the details. Completely undone. And then, all the white pages after the first couple of issues, I just stopped reading them because they felt like utter garbage. Really, when you think about what happened between Ten of Swords creation, so that was chapter 1, and Excalibur 15, which was chapter 21, like all the stuff in there really didn't matter. The reason the army couldn't invade Otherworld was because Saturnine was so powerful she could freeze everybody. She said they were going to have a combat at arms and someone's going to win. When there was a winner declared, they just came anyway. You're like, well, all the stuff that we read didn't matter. And really the only things of consequence that happened in that time were Captain Britain died, Gorgon died, and Cypher was married. They certainly could have incorporated the 2 deaths into the big battle. And the Cypher marriage...
Yeah, I agreed. I mean, it felt like there were a couple big things they wanted to get done, like Cypher getting married, and they were kind of creating filler around it. It was, you're just left with a number of questions. I mean, and Hellions here was a book that they intentionally added in. This was from the original plans of Ten of Swords. It wasn't in that mix. These 2 issues were not part of the crossover, and they said, oh, there's a good hook, let's add it in. But why did they add it in? They didn't need to. In fact, in many cases, they could have just had these stories without being chapters. It didn't need to be there. It probably would have felt a little bit more organic, but they wanted to cross over every X book into this thing. It was very.
They probably could have done Ten of Swords creation, the Excalibur X-Men issues, Stasis, then X-Men Excalibur, and then Destruction, and that should have been the event.
Yes, you could have been done, and I think we would have looked at it just way differently if this
absolutely, because that's where all the stuff happened.
Yeah, if this would have been a 6 or 7 issue event, or I mean, use the Fall of Mutants, go 9. Figure out the 9 books that are going to do this. I think you could have easily gotten it done. I think you could have been tighter with the storytelling, and I think you would have had people look more fondly on this event, because as it was, you had almost half the event being a sword quest. There wasn't a lot done. I think there was an opportunity there to maybe do some characterization and everything else, but they didn't really do that. And you got the swords, and then the swords didn't matter, and then you had a contest that at times felt like just kind of shenanigans, or to prove that Saturnine was a bitch. I think that was the point of it. And what was why Like we knew that. Like everybody knows that. It was Excalibur's been doing that for months now.
Yeah. So too many cooks in the kitchen, not enough oversight. There's too much filler. But I will say this. This is my last big takeaway, is when it delivered on the promise of what Ten of Swords was going to be, it absolutely delivered. When the moment when they turned on Apocalypse, which was kind of foreshadowed, I knew it was coming, it was exciting. When we finally got to see the Summoner and Wolverine fight through dimensions, it was pretty cool. I wish it was more than 3 pages. When Storm fought Death, that was pretty cool. Wish it was more than 3 pages. And we finally got the final confrontation, and Apocalypse gets overtaken by Annihilation. That was cool.
Yeah, it was. There were cool moments in this, and I think that's where, overall, you had an event. It felt like you had two stories that were coming together, mostly Teeny's story and a little bit Hickman's story. Hickman wanted to tell about the mythology of Apocalypse and his family and Arakko and kind of these elements. Teeny wanted
to reunite the islands and Apocalypse with his original family.
Right. And kind of put him in a new place. It was, as you could step back and look at that, you can say, okay, Apocalypse was somewhat aimless. Of course, he's been used in Teeny Howard's book, but it felt like there was a struggle with that character to some extent that was playing out. And then Teeny Howard wanted to tell a story about Otherworld and Saturnine and her love for Captain Britain and her dislike for Betsy and kind of this and remind people of this. So what you had was a Hickman kind of classic world building type story that we've seen before in Fantastic Four and Avengers and other things as he introduces these other races. And he had Teeny Howard kind of doing a, Alan Davis, Chris Claremont, Excalibur type story and from classic. And you had those two coming together. And I think what we've learned is those two don't fit together very well.
It's competing narratives.
Yeah, very competing. And it's hard because you're right. These moments that hit were powerful, good moments. They felt dangerous. They felt like, real stakes could happen. The comic went out of its way to remind us that real stakes were going to happen. If they died, it would be bad. But then that gets contradicted when you got them doing, puzzles and arm wrestling contests and silliness. And the whole nature of Otherworld and Jim Jaspers and kind of all these pieces is very much not silly, just, silly is probably a good word. It's just, it's lighter. That was
I called it literary nonsense.
Yeah, I was a fan of the Alan Davis Captain Britain stuff. I thought that was great. To see somebody kind of parroting it now, it's not the same. It isn't like it was, but it was always intended to be more lighthearted. And I don't think you can cross that lighthearted in with something, very deadly that Hickman's been building to and have it feel clean. But there are people who definitely like this event. I hear from them too, and you see people reviewing it very highly. But what you notice is I think the people who really enjoyed this event were people who were really enjoying Excalibur before this, who liked kind of that story and that world building and Otherworld and everything they had going on there. And if that's you, if you like that world that she was creating, then this event probably delivered in big ways for you. So it's kind of, I think for all the X fans, the challenge is there were people coming in from multiple books or fans of X-Force and Wolverine. Chances are those people were not as fond. They're probably the people who like this event the least. And with the fans of Hickman's work, you probably felt like you were being teased a lot. Like you got little moments, but not nearly enough of them.
Absolutely. And that's kind of where I came in. I'd already dropped Marauders. I dropped Excalibur, New Mutants. I dropped kind of the ones with the tone that I didn't really like. So that's probably kind of where my issues came in. Now let's talk about some really good moments. I've got 3 of them. Obviously, this is a 24-issue event. There's a lot of great moments that you could pick from. So the 3 that I think of, the very first one is that 2-issue story within Wolverine and X-Force where we finally really meet Solemn. Wolverine and Solemn travel to Hell to get the Muramasa blades. Is excellent character introduction. The art was fantastic from Victor Bogdanovich. It felt like Ben Percy was absolutely in his zone with this one, and it was excellent.
Yeah, I thought that was very good. It gives me a lot of hope of where that title goes. I think it was a good exploration. A lot got done, but it didn't feel like they were rushing through the comic. It introduced Solemn, who's going to be a major character from all from the sound of it. And it added to the mythology of Wolverine. I mean, it fit. It was a good. I agree. That was probably the high point of the series in terms of character work.
Mm-hmm. Now, the second moment for me is the Gorgon versus the white sword battle. Obviously, Krakoa was down big through a lot of shenanigans, which we will get here in a second. And Gorgon essentially saves the day, but along the way, he loses his eyes. The white sword offers him an opportunity to be conscripted into his army and resurrected. He passes. He puts him down with an honorable death. And Apocalypse says that's how a mutant dies. I thought it was very powerful. It was a culmination of a lot of things I didn't enjoy, but this moment in itself felt very important, and it was a good death for Gorgon.
Yeah, I agree. I'm curious what they do with that character, because Gorgon came out maybe the best of everybody in terms of the people who were in the tournament. Character came out tough. It was a nice, strong fight. It was the best fight I think we got in the tournament. Even though there were still some shenanigans involved in it, and it was kind of hokey how they caught up, basically. And it's also in an issue that featured a terrible moment for Cable, but yes. it was good. I think it's kind of a shame to me that the character that came off the best on the X-Men side is one they killed. But anyway.
Hopefully they don't resurrect him and he's got like a beach shirt. He wants to be a beach bum or something stupid, you know.
It feels. I hope
I feel it coming.
I can too. I can feel it coming, and they're going to want to do something comical.
Or maybe he's supposed to be the captain of the army, but now he doesn't want to fight.
I feel like they're going to bring him back, and they're going to use it as a way to show a twist that his personality is now the opposite, and maybe he's selfish, or he's a stoner, or just I don't know. I hope not. They did a lot with this character that was always kind of a background character. I mean, a villain certainly in the X-Men books, but not one of the forefront characters. And he got a good moment.
Yeah. And the final thing that I thought that was really good was in the final issue, which was brilliantly illustrated by Pepe Larraz, Ten of Swords Destruction. I liked the final state. Apocalypse wins. He defeated Genesis, who said he was too weak to go with him. He defeated Annihilation. Was able to free her from Annihilation, free her from her burden, was able to defeat Annihilation by giving Krakoa the win. He then went to Arakko as part of the exchange of prisoners to go be reunited with Genesis and his original Four Horsemen. And then he freed I guess he went to Ameth. And then he freed Arakko to rejoin with Krakoa, making Okara one whole being again. And we know there's another million mutants coming in there. I don't like that part. But overall, I thought, the end state, like from the beginning to where it ended up in the right place. And I like that part.
Yeah, it was satisfying in terms of what they've been doing with Apocalypse. They've been in redemption arc is kind of the wrong way to say it, but since the beginning of this series, they've been putting Apocalypse in a new state. It gave him the opportunity to lead, to be kind of the powerful statesman type character that he always was. It gave him some resolution with his family and everything else. And you do get the hint that, the character is still out there. He's joined by some extremely powerful allies. In fact, in many ways, hopefully they haven't been diminished through this event, which I think it did do to some extent, but they did establish real personalities for Genesis and for War and kind of these different characters. So it's, hopefully we see more of Apocalypse down the road, because I do think they did a good job with him. I'm not necessarily fond of the idea of, you win by surrendering as a concept. They've gone to the well with that a few times, but still.
Technically, he was Annihilation at the time who was on the other team. Yeah,
no, exactly. So
I'm with you on that.
It was a little, but still it was solid. I mean, I do like how they pulled some pieces together, and it was nice. So
yeah, he saved his wife. He got reunited with his family, and essentially he finally finished his 1,000-year quest.
Right. Yeah, it gave him some resolution, and he bolts back up again from that second page, which was nice.
So now let's get to what I consider probably the three low moments. Is there another moment that you thought was really good that I didn't mention here? My bad.
Yeah, the only other thing I think that is there was a bit with Doug in the first New Mutants issue where he's going to be a sword bearer, and he's kind of having to face his, for lack of a better word, his fears. Nobody thinks he can do it, but he's determined. He's gonna go, and he's going to be a powerful character. And I thought that was some good work with Doug. It was kind of undermined then with the issues that followed, But I do think that there was a, Doug has been this character in the background, kind of talking to Krakoa, this middleman type character, and I think there's some good building there. But unfortunately,
I'm with you. I love that issue, and that is in my part of the bad. The Doug's Bay the Blood Moon marriage that completely undermined all the character work that they did. They made it feel like he was going to be a big important part of the story, and that maybe he was going to turn the tide at some point. And then when it was time to fight, he was completely neutered. She threw him on his shoulder, or on her shoulder, and ran him off the battlefield because she was scared her husband would get hurt. I was like, all that wonderful character work he did, you set him up to be a big hero, and he ended up being a big zero.
Yeah, I mean, you exactly. It was very strange that they devoted an entire issue to him kind of facing his fears. He's going to do it. He has the bond with Warlock, and that's going to give him maybe an advantage because his sword is sentient, so it allows him to use his mind a little bit. And there's parts to what they were doing there that could have paid off in a good moment of maybe, putting up against Iska the Unbeatable, and it's like, yeah, but you didn't calculate that I had this other power to my. There was something they could have done, and instead they immediately whipped him into a marriage, which did not make sense. I mean, why they got married? I mean, an arranged marriage from Saturnine is a weird thing to kind of be cheering about. A lot of people are saying this is the best moment in comics. It's like, and an arranged marriage for Doug is the best moment in comics for the year. That's a weird way to look at things, but I agree. They ruined. They did some good things with him, and then they just gave it away. So. Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I think, one of the other things, probably the worst part of the entire event, was they kept retelling the same story over and over. And in X-Men 13 and 14, they reused the exact same art, like 15 consecutive pages. And, and they almost unforgivable.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be forgivable if this stuff was free, but when you're charging full price for these comics and you're just reusing art. I mean, I guess that's how you make your budget numbers for the year. I get the idea that we're going to tell the story from the other perspective, but it's hard not to look at that when you're paying full blown cover prices and not think you're being cheated to some extent. And also it's like you maybe, if you're having to retell the story over and over and over and over again, maybe your story's not great. Just for saying.
I think they thought they were doing a bunch of big reveals, but there was so much that was foreshadowed. As far as I knew, they were going to turn on Apocalypse. I knew Annihilation was actually Genesis. I said in the end, he's going to die. Closing the breach or reuniting Arakko, or he's going to be reunited with his wife. Like all that stuff was easily. They didn't need to keep telling the story. You knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, I got the feeling from watching the X-Men panel and listening to the creators and just some of the interviews. I got the feeling like the X-Men writers think that the readers are dumber than they are. Because they kept saying like, "Oh, you'll never see this coming." I think everybody saw it coming, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It means then you can tell the story and people be excited by it. But they kept asking like, you are not ready. You're not ready for what you're about to receive, and it's like everybody's ready.
I didn't see the marriage coming. I didn't see the reveal that Pagapur really had a little guy inside of him. That was about it.
Yeah, I mean and that's
not the big moments.
No, and it's not a bad thing if your comic. It means your readers are reading along. They're paying attention. That's not something to be angry about. It's not something to want to give away. I don't know. I get real tired of the, you are not ready for this. It's like, just tell a good story. Don't worry about people are ready or not. Stop defying expectations. Deliver something.
Yeah. And then the last bad moment was almost all the combat. It was just a big joke. It was the dance off, let's do some map questing. Let's do an arm wrestling. Let's murder a cat.
Yeah.
This is a big joke.
This was the defying expectation moment where it's like we're going to get everybody really hyped for a tournament. It's going to be dangerous. The stakes are high. If you die forever. Hey, it's a fashion show. And I think that was a place where the writers, again, they felt like they were being kind of cute and funny and like, oh, nobody will see this coming. And it's like, well, maybe.
That's where Jordan White needed to step in and say, hey, listen, I like where your guys are heading, but let's tighten it up and not make it so silly. Yeah,
not so many contests, and make all the contests meaningful. Like you spend a long time getting everybody on board that if they die, the stakes are huge. So
less dinner parties and more action.
Yeah, don't do that and then do a dinner party, do a puzzle contest, do a kill the cat contest. It's you need to you set up the stakes. You need to make those stakes meaningful, because what happens. Yeah, go ahead.
In an event like this, the stakes are high, and you need some levity. You need some things to kind of bring you down and kind of cut the tension a little bit. Like the thing with the cat, that you need to murder a cat now. How about a 3-way dance between the cat, War, and whoever was the other one, and it turns out it's a fire-breathing cat.
Sure,
that could be cool. It turns out the little kitten's a lot more dangerous than it looked. You're in Otherworld. There's things that you could do. You
can, and you can keep the focus on the fights and the stakes. I think that the challenge is when you do these kinds of dance off and other silliness. When you do get to a battle, when you get to that storm death fight, and it's the same length as the 3 pages or so of kind of silliness, it undermines that fight. You take a moment away from her, and I think. Again, if you're coming into this and you kind of like the Excalibur kind of tarot card silliness and that type stuff, then this is probably exactly what you wanted. But if you're an X-Men fan of many of the other books, this was just a what the hell moment.
Yeah, there's a lot of them, and it was strung throughout. As soon as the combat started, it was like, oh, I read a lot of comic books, did not get what I thought I was expecting, and it wasn't what I wanted, so... That's kind of like the overall thing, taking some of our big ideas. Was there anything else that you thought was specifically bad as far as a moment? I didn't mean to skip over you again.
No, not. I mean, I would have liked it to be better. It was Hickman's from his new X-Men launch at the first big event. I think in hindsight, I wouldn't have had my first big event be saturnine shenanigans as your run out the gate kind of thing. I completely agree with you. If they just kept it 9 issues or so, keep it tight, 6 to 9, do it Mutant Massacre, Fall of the Mutant style, do it about that length, go with it. Don't try and wrap anything in. I think we'd be looking at this and it would be a much higher grade. But now we're off into Reign of X. So, get all pumped up for the next event. The thing that struck me, by the way, is this ends this week, this ends. And then 1 week later, King in Black begins. So it's
Reign of X.
Yeah, there's Reign of Events. There are for a bigger sense where Marvel's concerned. You guys, you're doing too much. Like you're doing way too much. You should not have an event back into an event. And it is from.
And you got the Spider-Man big story going on right now. That's obviously not an event, but it's a big story.
Oh, you have that. You have the Avengers Phoenix tournament starting out in 2 weeks. From what I've been told, the King in Black is going to end, and there will be another event that they will be announcing relatively shortly for March that will pick up the week after King in Black ends. So it's like you're blowing it. It's too much, and I get it that maybe X-Men fans are not going to read King in Black, but it's just a lot. It's hard on the wallet. It's hard on people's minds to be constantly deluged with events.
Absolutely. So are you expecting Reign of X? Obviously, that's the next iteration of Jonathan Hickman's X-Men. That's going to wrap up in another event. Then we'll get another iteration, right?
From what I understand, Reign of X is going to go about 1.5 years, and we're going to get a middle event and an end event. So there will be 2 events in there.
Okay, so this is going to be a little bit different. Good.
Yeah. But, I think Dawn of X lasted 14 months, I guess. So... no, wait, sorry. About 13, 14 months. X-Men launched in October of last year, so about 13 months and change. So it'll be a little bit longer than that, but from what I understand, we're getting 2 events in this.
Terrific. So my score remains a C-. I'm not going up or down. Basically, I was like, I think I've kind of got it close. Do you have a grade to give it, just as far as the event itself?
Yeah, it's probably about there. I mean, I was trying to think. It's definitely on the bottom end of events that X-Men have done. I recently reviewed the Astonishing X-Men run, and people were telling me I was very hard on it, but I would read that any day of the week over Ten of Swords. So, I think this is about right. It was not one of the better moments, but it delivered on a couple things. It just, all in all, too many comics and tough.
I agree with you. So thank you very much for joining me today doing this wrap up. Obviously, we will be wrapping up, Dark Knight's Death Metal over DC Comics. We'll probably be wrapping up Last Remains. I think there's a big There's a big story starting up in Thor. So we got a lot of stuff to wrap up here in the next few months.
Absolutely. Yeah, the events keep coming.